I am Professor Arvind Kumar Jha from School of Education, IGNOU, New Delhi. Today I am going to talk about cognitivism and its educational implications. Friends, earlier in earlier video I talked about behaviorism, right? And in which we discussed that human beings learn when he or she observes certain objects or events happening outside of him or her. So, in this case, psychologists focus their studies on observable behavior. What kind of behavior? Observable behavior. In contrast with behaviorism, cognitivism is the study of psychology which concentrates on our mental processes such as how we perceive, how we think, how we learn, and how we solve problem. And as far as the behaviorism is concerned, as I said, it emphasized more on behavior and behavior. And yesterday we talked about Pavlov in earlier video and the Skinner. Today, as far as the cognitivism is concerned, I am going to concentrate on Robert Gattin. He was an American psychologist who developed the theory of learning in terms of the degree of complexity of the mental processes involved. And according to Gattin, learning is something which takes place inside of an individual's brain, which cannot be seen directly. And therefore, it is concluded from observable behavior or from change in one's ability to perform certain actions. Thus, the major reason behind learning is the development of capacity to change the performance and alter qualities like attitude, interest, or values, which we call a change of behavior due to acquisition of new learning. So, his theory deals with external and internal conditions of learning, not only external conditions of learning as we saw in the case of behaviorism. The internal condition refers to previous learning capabilities of the learner. What does it mean? It means what learner knows prior to instruction. The external condition refers to stimulus that is presented externally to learners. He suggested 4 phases of learning which are as follows. Number 1, receiving the stimulus situation. Number 2, stage of acquisition. Number 3, storage. And number 4, retrieval. So, keeping all these stages in mind, Gattin was of the view that learning cannot be explained with the help of learning theories only. He used the principle of classical conditioning and operant conditioning for simple type of learning, but they are not enough for explaining concept like learning and problem solving. So, Gattin was of the view that learning conditions are prerequisite to understand the concept of learning. He considers that there is a numerous range of learning conditions and behaviors. So, the act of teaching is continuous from memory to reflexive level. He considers teaching as arrangement of conditions for learning at each stage of learning, and therefore, he identified 8 different types of conditions in which human learning takes place. So, the arrangement of these learning is from simple to complex. The signal learning is simple and problem solving is complex one. And his theory of learning is also known as hierarchy theory of learning. So, anybody asks you who gave the hierarchy theory of learning, your answer will be about Gattin. And that is why we call Gattin's hierarchy theory of learning. He identified 8 types of learning, as I said. The first is called problem solving learning. Second is rote learning. Third, concept learning. Fourth, multiple discrimination. Fifth, verbal association. Sixth, chain learning, 7th SR learning, and 8th single learning, as I said earlier, friends. Now, you must be wondering, what is the implication of all these points that we have discussed just now as far as education is concerned? So, I am going to talk about the educational implications of Genne's theory of learning. So, Genne's theory of learning comprises, as I said just now, 8 levels of learning where the learner masters the lower level before mastering the next higher level. The lowest 4 levels focus on behavioral aspects, whereas highest 4 levels on cognitive aspects. And it starts with signal learning and ends with problem solving. Likes and dislikes of the children are acquired through signal learning. So, Genne advocated that learners should learn from simple things to complex things so that he or she can easily learn the things in a systematic way. And that's why when curriculum is arranged, when the contents of a syllabus is arranged, this particular point is kept in mind while formulating a particular syllabus at a particular level. For example, what students are supposed to study at 3rd standard, we don't prescribe at the 1st or the 2nd standard, right? So, from simple things, then we go and keep on moving, friends. Another important points as far as the educational implication is concerned are chain learning occurs when learners are able to connect previously learned stimulus, and therefore concept learning plays an important role in forming a systematic structure for deep learning. Then there is another concept called rule learning. Rule learning is important in school subjects. Again, in my case, because I belong to the discipline of mathematics, subjects like mathematics, science, geography, etc. So, problem solving is the last level where learners develop their ability to invent procedures to solve problems. Hence, it is the responsibility of the teacher to organize learning experiences in a proper way and to formulate suitable strategies to cater to the needs of the students, friends. There is another one and very powerful cognitivist thinker I would like to discuss here, and he is none other than David B. Oswald. Oswald's theory of meaningful learning is a well-celebrated theory of learning, as he was the pioneer of meaningful learning theory. He talked about verbal learning, and for him, verbal learning is the main concern of his theory, and he explains how the learner incorporates new information into their cognitive structure and the structure of knowledge in mind. For him, the existing cognitive structure is the main factor influencing learning and retention of a new material. He was interested with questions like how a child acquires knowledge. Either he receives knowledge that is presented to him or her, or gets knowledge independently by him or her through discovery. So, Oswald advocated 4 types of learning, and the 4 types are reception learning, discovery learning, rote learning, and meaningful learning, friends. As far as the reception learning is concerned, when a student merely receives knowledge that is presented to him or her via classroom teaching, textbooks, reference materials, various aids, etc., is known as perception learning. For example, when a teacher teaches his or her learners about the concept of environment, learners receive the concept of environment as explained by teacher, is known as reception learning. Here, child only receives knowledge as it is presented to him. That's it. As far as the discovery learning is concerned, I'll give you another example. When child gets information about the new information, independently by himself or herself, it is called discovery learning. And it is a basically inquiry based learning in which learner himself or herself finds the solution to the problem on the basis of his or her past and present knowledge. For example, learner himself or herself learns new information through experimentation in the laboratory or discovers new ideas through project work or any other means. All such learnings come under discovery learning, friends. Then there is another learning, the rote learning. Memorization, you all know, memorization of information based on repetition without understanding is known as rote learning. For example, if somebody asks me, what will be the value of 19 into 5, right? If I actually multiply, it means understanding is involved. But suppose I have already mugged it up and somebody asks, okay, 19 into 5, 95. So, or somebody says 18 into 5, I say 90. I don't take time because I have already mugged up the things. So, children in primary classes learn multiplication tables by rote without knowing the principles of multiplication. If they are exposed to that instead of memorizing a fact that how and why 18 into 5 becomes 90, not 95. Lot of learning will take place, right? But unfortunately that doesn't happen. I remember I was just asking one student to memorize a table of 90, and on the one hand. On the other hand, I said, okay, there was another student who found it very difficult to remember. I said, can you see the behavior of number? And the marvelous ideas he gave, even I was surprised. Now, the next learning is, friends, meaningful learning. Meaningful learning is active, constructive, and long lasting. It takes place when new information is incorporated in the existing information in the cognitive structure. For example, a learner knows about the concept of animal, which is in his or her existing cognitive structure. Now, his or her teacher shows him or her the picture of a kangaroo, right? And a new animal which he or she has not seen earlier. Now, he has the concept of animal, but he doesn't have the concept of the kangaroo as an animal. So, this new information gets incorporated into the existing information and becomes meaningful. Oh, kangaroo is also an animal, but kangaroo looks like this, or kangaroo has so and so characteristics. So, according to Osobel, both reception and discovery learning can be nothing but a kind of rote learning. If the new information to be learned is not only meaningfully incorporated into the existing cognitive structure. Now, again, what do you think? What could be the possible educational implications of Osobel's theory? Osobel gives importance to the, as I said, and again I would like to repeat, to the meaningful learning instead of rote learning. Therefore, parents, teachers, and even a school must adopt methods through which learners develop ability to learn meaningfully. And therefore, it is expected that the teacher should help the students to understand the concepts instead of retaining or memorizing them. So, friends, teaching learning process need to stress on what? It needs to stress on meaningful learning. So, students should be encouraged to develop their own concepts on the basis of their past learning relating with present experiences. So, the teaching materials presented by teachers to learners need to be properly structured, systematic, and meaningful. And this is called as Osobel's advanced organizer, friends. Well, the other things are also important, like it is used as a tool by teachers through which learners integrate new information with their existing knowledge in the cognitive structure and are able to form meaningful learning. So, and that's why Ausubel advocated didactic and expository teaching methods, and the purpose of these two teaching methods are to facilitate learners' rapid learning, but not only rapid learning, but the retention as well. And he laid emphasis on active nature of reception learning. So, teacher must help learners in understanding, completing, missing word and rewording sentences by giving additional examples. Friends, there is another very powerful thinker, and he is none other than Jerome Bruner. Like Ausubel, he was also an American psychologist who advocated the theory of instruction, and he was of the opinion that knowledge is presented and organized through different modes of thinking and reproduction. His view on the cognitive development is based on the premise that the knowledge of the individual is based on man-made models of reality. And he lays a stress on language for cognitive development, and therefore Bruner developed 3 stages of cognitive development. The first stage is known as inactive stage, and he says it is from 0 to 1 year, and at this stage, that is inactive stage, it is the representation of knowledge through actions, and there is a direct manipulation of objects by infants without any internal representation of the objects. So, thinking is based on what? Here, thinking is based on physical action. Infants learn by doing rather than internal representation of learning object. The second stage, Bruner has identified it as iconic stage, and he says it could be between 1 to 6 years. And in this stage, child represents external objects visually in the form of mental image or icon. So, information is stored as visual images like pictures in the mind. Visual images and pictures need to be presented while providing learners verbal information. Then there is a third stage, and this third stage is known as symbolic stage. Now, this is considered 7 years onwards. So, once a child starts 7 years and onwards, he or she comes at this stage. And this is a stage where information is stored in the form of a code or symbol such as language. So, the moment somebody tells me, do you know what is a mango? The moment he say M-A-N-G-O, mango, all visuals, everything is there in my mind. So, knowledge is stored primarily as words. Or somebody say that, do you know what is a phi is a symbol of what? And if somebody say, oh, phi is a symbol of null set. So, mathematical symbols or other symbol systems such as music. So, according to Bruner, learning takes place by the active processing of information, which is constructed and organized by the learner in a unique way. Individuals do not get ready-made knowledge about the world. Rather, they select the environment, process and organize the information which they take from the environment and store it in their own way for future use. Now, what is the use of studying Bruner's theory of learning? Or you can say, what are educational implications of Bruner's theory? See, Bruner gives a stress on what? Bruner gives a stress on readiness of learner in the learning process. Teacher must take into account the experiences and context of child which motivate him or her to learn. So, teaching learning process should take into account nature of the learner and predispositions in him or in her. So, the role of a structure in learning and how it may be made center of teaching need to be focused by the teacher. So educational goals must be clear and related to life of the learner, as they help develop intrinsic motivation which activates the process of exploration. So the learner must be aware of goals of life because they desire to learn. Now, another very important educational implications could be, you all must have realized by this time that he has given importance to child in learning process, and he was also of the opinion that knowledge must be related to previous experience of the child. It must be designed in such a way that it is effective for development of the learner. Selection of subject matter must be appropriate for children at different levels of development, and there are 3 ways of representation of subject matter, that is through actions, through images and through symbols. Further, as far as the educational implications of Bruner's theory is concerned, you can say that the teaching learning materials, whether it is a curriculum or the syllabus or the textbook, should be systematically arranged for effective teaching and must be prepared following the principles of simple to complex, easy to difficult, known to unknown, and concrete to abstract. And that's why perhaps Bruner developed a spiral curriculum. What do you mean by a spiral curriculum? A spiral curriculum indicates repetition of topics of a subject at curriculum in different stages of school education. Okay? Bruner believed that any child of any age could be taught any subject at any stage of development. And that's a very, very powerful message. The sequence of teaching learning is a combination of actually performing it. It means through doing it, through sensing it, and through a symbolic means such as language leading to effective learning. The progress starts with doing, then moves to picture, and finally to using symbolic representation. Now friends, social cognition. Let's give some time to social cognition. Social cognition is a very, very important topic of social psychology that gives importance on how people process, how people store the information about different people and social situation, as well as apply these information to new social situations. So, social psychology mainly deals with cognitive than general psychology. So, social psychology deals with internal mental state such as beliefs and desires. Social information helps people to make different judgments and decisions. It is the process in which you allow human being to live in the society, to develop the ability to create effective relationship with others and is able to interact with them. So, social cognition helps us to understand the social psychological phenomena by finding out the cognitive processes that remain behind them. Thus, what we think about others plays an important role in what we feel and how we interact with others around us. So, the 4 core processes of social cognition are: number 1, select, interpret, remember and use. For example, selecting the social information, interpreting that social information, remembering that social information, and ultimately using that social information. So, the core concept of social cognition theory is focused on the concept that individuals learn by observing others. Okay? And here comes the role of Bandura. Bandura explained it through a schematization of triadic reciprocal causations, right, which I will be talking about just now. Personal, behavioral, environmental and human agency, friends. Now, as far as the personal is concerned, if the individual has high efficacy or belief in his or her abilities that he or she will perform the behavior correctly, then he or she will be able to do the things in a proper way and vice versa. Behavioral, if the individual performs any task which receives positive feedback, it motivates him or her to perform correctly. Environmental, you all know environment plays an important role in acquiring any behavior, or it shows the ability of a person to perform it successfully with the help of proper condition, support and material. Last but not the least, human agency. Human agency theory says that human is pervasive in nature. No one can suggest or tell him or her to do anything. He or she can decide about his or her own actions. People set their own goals, plan for them, apply strategies to implement the plan and reflect on their action. This is in short all about cognitivism and educational implications. Thank you.